we're excited to have you guys out this evening, and thank you so much to Bluegrass Greensource for offering this program to Frankfurt residents again this year. We're really thankful that they are partnering with us this evening. I just wanted to give you some info about two things that might be of interest to you coming up. We have our first annual Fix It Fair, where we will be repairing household items for free with some other community partners. So there's a flyer in the back for more info. We do ask that you register so we know what items are coming and are prepared for you. And the second thing is, I see a lot of regular library folks out here. I know you're readers. If you want to enter in to win our adult summer reading prizes, which are hefty gift cards to Poor Richard's Books, Andy's Bakery, Engine House Coffee, and The Grand, go to our website. We track everything through Bean Stack. We can help you with that if you need help. And if you attend events like this evening, you are entered in one time. And if you read 3 books, you have another entry. So just keep on reading and attending events. And if you need help registering, let me know. But I'm going to turn it over to Amy at Bluegrass Greensource. And thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you very much, Megan. This is an awesome library, and I want to come here and check out books, and I love Poor Richard, so that's really fun. I don't know if I'm allowed to enter from a different county, but thank you all for being here. We're so excited to have you. How many of you have heard of Bluegrass Greensource before today? Oh, you guys are my favorites. We're very excited then to have you. For those of you who haven't heard about us, I can't have an audience and not tell you just a few words about us. We are an environmental education nonprofit. We are celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, so we are a quarter of a century, and so we're very excited about that. Our mission is to empower the bluegrass to create a sustainable environment, and we do that by encouraging small changes that make a really big impact right here in our local environment, right here in our local areas. So in your backyard, in your school grounds, in your community. We work with preschool through 12th grade and also adults on a variety of topics, including energy, but also water quality, waste reduction, general ecology. And then maybe importantly to you all, when it's not 95 degrees, you might want to come out to Buckley Wildlife Sanctuary. If that's located between Frankfurt, it's actually closer to Frankfurt than Versailles, but it's in both Woodford and Franklin counties, and it's 375 acres, 6 miles of trails, a bird line, a nature center. It's just a really fun, peaceful place that's not very well traveled, which we like, but we also want people to know about it and come when you can. So keep that in mind moving forward. Okay, so you're here because we, like I said, our motto is small changes, big impact, and there are a lot of things that are small that you can do at your home that make a big impact in your home for a variety of reasons. But before we talk about that, I want to first talk about our sponsor. So as a nonprofit, we have to do this through grants and fundraising, and we are very, very grateful to have the Office of Energy Policy, which is at the state of Kentucky, through Department of Energy grant that funds these workshops. So at the end of the workshop, you'll be getting a kit that's worth close to $100 of things that you can take home and really make your home more efficient. And that's because of our generous grant from the Office of Energy Policy at the state. So there's a lot of information up there about it. It's in the Energy and Environment Cabinet. And if I can shout out to Billy back here. Billy is our grant administrator. So if you like the workshop only, you can tell her at the end how great it was when you're leaving. If you don't like it, you can also tell us, because we do have a survey. Couple of housekeeping before we get started. Because it's a grant, we need to tell Billy's here, but we need to show Billy how many people came, and so make sure you sign in on the back for us over there. I know you signed up for the event, but we need to make sure that you need to count how many people are actually here, so that's important. And then at the end, we're going to have a survey. I'll start passing that around so you have it with you, but at the end, if you fill out your survey, you can go and get a kit over there once Rachel's done. So with that, I would like to introduce Rachel North. She is a certified energy advisor, I believe, and has been working with us on this program for a very long time. She's a very big expert in this field. She's an energy engineer and has been working in this with us for a very long time. So I will turn it over to Rachel.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I'm gonna move around, so maybe I can take this with me. There we go, just to make sure you guys can still hear me. Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much, Bluegrass Greensource, Sawyier Public Library. I love this library. So cool that you guys have a Fix-It Fair. I feel like this is part of the Fix-It Fair, honestly.
It's the kickoff.
It's the kickoff to the Fix-It Fair. Get ready. Like Amy was saying, my name's Rachel North. I'm still getting used to my new last name. It was Rachel Norton. But I got married. We combined our names, so that's pretty fun. Smith, we decided Smith and Norton, we'd go with North instead of Smorton, even though, there's some good options there. Yeah, I think I've been doing these for almost 10 years. Is that right?
That sounds right.
I think that's right. And these first came out of working with my mentor, Chris Woolery. I worked at an organization you all may know of called Mountain Association for about 7 years, doing energy efficiency and solar projects in eastern Kentucky for residential and small commercial businesses. Over the last 3, I've been at an engineering firm in Lexington called Paladin, and now I work on larger commercial and industrial buildings, working on their mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems, but I also focus on LEED. So I've just been from houses all the way up to giant steel manufacturing. So it's been really exciting. It's been a really good go, but energy efficiency is still really dear to my heart. I've lived in a really tiny apartment, and I've lived in what I live in now, which is a 120-year-old house, and I believe energy efficiency applies to any of these places, and you can do a variety of things and adapt it to your needs. So why do we do it? I feel like a lot of folks are here for a variety of these reasons. Ideally, it's somewhat easy, hence the DIY energy efficiency workshop. And as we go through, I'll kind of talk to you about like, this might be, if this is your first time, this might be your beginner one you want to start with, and then maybe this is a more intermediate one that you want to do as a phase 2. For example, like, don't go home and get in your attic for a little while. It's so hot. So we'll talk through those things, and I'll try to bring out, I will at the end go through the kit, but I'll try to bring out those items as we go through. Sometimes that helps with context. We also like energy efficiency because it's relatively inexpensive and often does pay for itself over time. So for example, if you were to have older lighting fixtures like incandescent bulbs in your house, changing them to LEDs would pay for themselves within a year, usually, in your home, if you regularly use your lights on a daily basis. Most people do. And then also, reducing greenhouse gases is another reason people like energy efficiency, because it's better for the environment. We all like to save money, we like to save energy, and it also creates a healthier environment as well. So, cleaner air for us to breathe, all that good stuff. And save us money. I feel like that's paired with the relatively inexpensive, but yeah, ideally you do this work and you see a bit of an impact on your energy bill, and you go like, wow, I'm gonna pat myself on the back, that felt really good. I can say, it does feel really good when you see it for your own home. So the different things that we're gonna focus on today are air sealing, insulation, and HVAC. And probably primarily air sealing, but we'll talk about insulation, and with HVAC, we'll talk about little things you can do, and when we do have some kind of like more in-depth projects like this would be the intermediate one, for sure. And when we talk about duct sealing, that would be like, okay, I've done all the other things, I'm ready to use all the PPE and figure out how to do this for myself. So we'll start from one end and go to the other, kind of how these pictures appear. You can see some air sealing on the first 2 photos, using a caulk gun, using spray foam, and then we have HVAC duct photos from there. So we'll start with air sealing. I like to think about air sealing like I'm getting dressed to go out into the winter, which is kind of a weird thing to think of on a day like today. But in terms of insulation, thinking about heat rises, I want to make sure I have my really warm hat. I want to make sure I have really warm socks and shoes on. And I want to make sure I have good layers, but I don't need so many layers if I'm not as much as might be escaping from my head or my feet. And so what you can see here is a thermal image of a home with the red at the very top. And so that's showing us that the heat is rising all the way up into the attic. And what you might see, for example, in the winter, if it had snowed and you would pass this house, you might see all the snow had melted off the top of that house. Meanwhile, the houses next to it, maybe their snow melted off, maybe it didn't. That's always a fun game for me, is drive through the neighborhood and see which houses need insulation. But that's a very telling thing. Certainly in winter, that's not the right season for, now's not the right season for that. But in general, we talk about you want to start at the top. Now there are a couple different things to think about when you're starting at the top. You can see in a little more detail how we have the red arrows and they're going upwards. They're going upwards through little crevices, and they're going upwards through bigger crevices like an attic hatch, and we'll talk about that in more detail later. I think some of you are familiar faces, so you'll probably remember that I like to say if you're gonna leave here today and there's one project you're gonna go do, it's make sure your attic hatch is sealed and insulated. That would be probably one of the most impactful things you could do with a couple hours of your time. So not only do you want to seal the top, but even when you seal the top, we still have heat rising, especially if you have like multiple stories of your home. And that will still happen if at the bottom of your house there are a lot of gaps that will be encouraged to rise. So after you seal the top, you might find like, oh, my second story is really warm, but my first story isn't in the winter. So what do I do next? You seal the bottom. And not only is that an energy efficiency benefit in Kentucky, because we're one of the most water-rich states in the nation, we also have a lot of mold, and we have a lot of general environmental growth, which doesn't always, it's not always, I know people hear mold and they're like, oh no. There's lots of varieties of mold, and I take it from someone who's allergic to probably all of them. A lot of them are relatively harmless, but it is really great in crawl spaces to have a vapor barrier down and choose a way that you're gonna seal, whether that's on, well, this is a basement, but if it were shorter, whether it would be on the walls of your crawl space or under the floor. So just choosing, we like to call that the envelope of the building, just choosing where the envelope of the building stops. And that's where you're gonna decide to both air seal and insulate. So start at the top, go to the bottom, you're both helping your air sealing and also likely in Kentucky your air quality if you have a crawl space. And then you move to the items around the side. And I will say, we'll talk a little bit about the attic and above ceiling and the basement or crawl. Well, a basement actually would be less challenging, but a crawl might be quite challenging to air seal compared to some of the easier opportunities around on the sides, such as windows and doors. So we like to say these are the priorities. But it's also depending on what's most accessible to you and what's like best suited for what activities you want to try. So in general, kind of like what we just talked through, where is your air leaking? We just kind of covered that big picture of floors, walls, and ceiling. So I was talking about for the ceiling, you're gonna have different areas of leakage, like that attic hatch, and walls and ceiling as well, different areas that will have leakage, but the specific things that you want to cover, so like next would be the ductwork. And the reason ducts are so important is even, whereas if you had a really small hole in your wall versus the size of a hole in your ductwork in your attic, in your wall, it would be unpleasant, certainly, but you're not actively pushing your freshly conditioned air out of that hole in a duct. You're actively pushing air all the time, so you are just, that hole becomes a lot more wasteful in your ductwork, is my point. So you end up, as Chris Sawyier would like to say, you're just heat nickel on the outside. If your ductwork, which as it often is in your attic or in your crawl space where it's not inside your home, so people have them inside of their basement or in conditioned space. So ducts are the next. Fireplaces are often, some people think about the damper, and that is important to do, especially if you don't use it. You can seal it more permanently. There are ways to do that cheaply, but there are also balloons you can get where you can seal them, have a stronger seal in the winter or summer, and that does help that heat rising effect in your home during all seasons. But often the way they're finished is on an exterior wall, and either the brick or the stone or whatever was used has a really big gap between the wall and that finishing material. So there's actually often a good opportunity that's like fairly easy to seal between that material, that brick or that stone, and the wall. And you could use caulk to do something like that. And actually, so that's, I can do one of the first items in your kit. Well, one of many items in your kit, which is caulk and a caulk gun. And most people are fairly familiar with how to use these. In general, it's nice to know. That after you, usually using a box knife, got the very tip off, you can use this piece to actually re-pierce it. If this dries, you can continue to reuse it. Sometimes people will just put a nail in the top if you don't use it all at once, things like that. So those are really handy. The gun is reusable, and the caulk you just use until you run out. One thing to keep in mind is often, even though that says clear on it and it will dry clear, it will often come out white. And so don't panic if you're like, oh no, I just made a huge mess. It will dry whatever color it says on the bottle. And I will say, as we're getting into this, I'm still in my day job outfit. I apologize, but I have my steel toe boots, so I always like to do a reminder of PPE, and there's a variety of, that's personal protective equipment in the biz. So I think people were more used to that term during COVID, for better or worse, but things like face masks, protective glasses if you don't wear glasses normally, gloves, and you wouldn't need steel-toed shoes for any of these projects, but just being mindful that if you are going to use a caulk gun, you might want to use some gloves. You might not want to get that on your hands. There are often acrylic will come off with soap and water, but if you do choose to go out and buy your own, not all of it comes off with soap and water, so just being mindful of that. And then continuing on, I'll just touch on these because we'll get into details about these as we go. Plumbing penetrations, those are the ones that you know where it's cold and where it's hot when you open that cabinet under your kitchen sink, or you open that cabinet under the bathroom and it's really cold, or right now it's really hot. That's where you're going to want to seal that plumbing penetration. And actually, there is a photo of that later on, so we'll see that later. Doors and windows, one thing to note about those, especially if you're in an older home, like I am right now, is that often the people that were finishing those were not energy efficiency nerds like me. They were painters, so they wouldn't caulk the tops of any of the doors or windows, or the bottoms of the windows, because you don't see them. So it's possible that your house has a bunch of opportunity, then you could go and do the tops of all the windows and doors and the bottoms of the windows. Because it used to be, before we knew it was energy efficient, it was just considered aesthetic to do that. So that's an opportunity you can definitely check for. Fans and vents, we'll get into a little bit more detail about vents later, and electrical outlets. I will say, so we do have that in your kit. We do have insulation for electrical outlets, which kind of looks like this. You've probably seen these before. And those will be especially handy in older homes like mine, where the framing is such that the walls are interconnected throughout the house. In ways that newer homes, that's not the type of framing that is common anymore, really, even since the 70s and 80s, it's not that common anymore. But you would also know, or you would notice, especially on a day like today, if you would feel warmth around your outlets, and you would notice, you would feel, especially in the winter, I think most people are more sensitive to extreme cold, you would be able to feel the cold air in those areas, so that's something to keep an eye out for. So, now that we've covered touched on all the options, we're kind of starting in more detail here. So, starting at the top, we're in the attic now. Some things to note here, are actually that this insulation over here has dust on it, and there's dust around this outlet in general, and that is a sign of airflow. So that's something that you can use, especially if you do have that pink or yellow batt insulation in your attic. You can go and be like, oh, like that area has a lot of dust, like something's going on there. That's where it would be most useful to spend your time. And in this case, they found this around this electrical box, and they're sealing all these holes. The smaller ones and the perimeter, they're using a caulk gun, and it looks like they peeled it back even more, and they found a larger hole where the wires were going through, and that's where they use spray foam. And you do have a can of that in your kit today, and it looks like this. So it comes with a little tube that attaches, and when we talk about personal protective equipment, you definitely want to wear gloves if you're using spray foam. That stuff does not come off. Don't wear your favorite shirt, just be ready for that. So yeah, wear your project shirt for that one. And just be mindful that it does often take a lot of time to dry, and it often continues to expand while it dries. So it's things like an attic, you don't really need to worry about it too much. It's not going to be in the way if it expands more, but you'll want to think about that a little bit more when we talk about like the plumbing situation, when needing to put things back together for plumbing penetration holes. But so those are some examples of what you might find in your attic. This is my favorite one. This is the one that I say, this is the one that when I did home energy audits for 7 years, I found it over and over. If your entire attic is insulated and your one little attic hatch is not, you are losing so much heat in the winter. And this is a spot, most people have a traditional type of attic hatch where you can just push it up and slide it to the side. Often I did even find that, you might find this too, that people have this batt insulation cut to the right square of their attic hatch, and it was just laying over to the side. And if that's the case, you can attach it with caulk. You can attach the paper side down, make sure it sticks there, so when you set it back down, you're good to go. And what they're also doing that I really like in this image is they're using weather stripping, which you also have. So it's just this like gray material that's sticky on both sides. You can cut it really easily with a box knife. You can also just rip it. But that gives you a really nice seal. They go the extra mile and they do a hook and eye latch even, which I think is lovely. I don't think it necessarily increases the energy efficiency of your project. It's just nice. So that part's up to you. Do most people have a traditional hatch like this, or does anybody have anything else that they have questions? Yeah. Pull downstairs. So those, you can construct your own box. You have to do it over the stairs inside the attic. So most of them do have a frame around them. And so if I were to do it myself, which would probably be, it's just hard to get some of that rigid foam. I would use rigid foam, but it's difficult sometimes to get a nice edge. But you could do rigid foam on each side and then have one long sheet. You just need to make sure you can secure it closed. So you could build one. They also, I think, have really nice options that they come in, I don't know what the name of the material is, but it looks like reflective silver, and it is insulation, and it actually unzips. And I think that's really nice. Last I checked, you could get one relatively cheaply. I often see them. There's a Menards in Richmond now that I was really excited about. They often, if you actually mail in the rebate, have really good deals. So that's where I would look for something like that. But are your stairs in, sometimes they're in a garage and you don't need to insulate. No, it's inside. Yeah. It would make a big difference because they're so much bigger than just a little, yeah. Yeah. So if I was doing that, I'd probably explore the option of the zipper one, and you can still install it yourself and everything. But if it has gotten more cost prohibitive recently, then I would explore just using the 2-inch rigid foam and seeing what it would be like to construct that, because that would be beneficial. Yeah. Any other questions so far? afternoon, you have time, you can take this piece down so you don't have to be in your attic. This is definitely the one that I say, this is the biggest difference, for sure. So on from there, often we actually do consider crown molding and shoe molding your ceilings and floor areas. So those are good areas to start. And really, like you see here, you're just sealing between the molding and the wall, or the molding and the ceiling. That's where you're wanting to do it. And lots of people do just use their finger to, words. Oh, we're gonna smooth it out. Thank you. I think I've been repeat too much this week, y'all. Thank you. They often use that sometimes. I actually just like a wet sponge. That works really nicely, and it also is like kind of cleaning up as I go. So that is my preference, but that works just as well. There's all kinds of little tools at like Home Depot and stuff, but you just using it like this and a sponge is really more than sufficient in my opinion. And then moving on from there, doing your windows and doors, and like is shown here, generally just doing the outside of the trim. But like I talked about earlier, you want to especially check the top and the bottom for opportunity. In older homes, you'll see other opportunities for sealing windows. Like in this picture, there can be other gaps. And really, as long as you don't seal your windows shut, you can seal any of it with off. Just make sure you're not sealing the parts that need to move, and you would be good to go. I think if there's, does anyone live in a manufactured house here? Okay. Because there are some different things there, but I haven't gotten that many folks with those in a little while. But those, yeah, the narrative walls are listed at the top here. Okay, here's our plumbing penetration photo that I keep referencing. So this is what I'm talking about. You're just moving this piece back. It should be relatively free moving, and you're able to seal. And then that's what I was saying. Your foam will expand. So making sure either you can just as it dries, often come in and squish it down. If you're home, it takes hours and hours, but you can do that. Or some of it you do have to cut away a bit once it's fully dry, so that you can move that piece back. But like I was saying, these are the spaces you really know when you open the cupboard when it's too hot or it's too cold. Those would be great spaces to work on. And there often are different types of plumbing in attic and crawl spaces, and those would be really important places to seal. So in this example, you would definitely want to use spray foam, but that's something that you can check. You can also see in this photo that like there's definitely more dust and like brown colored insulation in this area, so there's just been a lot of air moving there for a while. But that's also something you can check. Just be mindful, sometimes there are flues for mechanical equipment that would be metal and larger than your average plumbing pipe. So you just want to make sure whatever was used is rated for the heat of that material. But often you'll see PVC, or you'll be aware of the plumbing. PVC or PEX, maybe copper. Yeah.
Is it standard for companies that install installation to do that kind of sealing in the attic when they install it?
I wish that it was. I don't know any that do so traditional insulation like that, or this is like this spray in that where it's loose or rolling it out, probably not. But spray foam is getting more popular for fully insulating attics and crawl spaces, which they would be mindful of things like that. They would make sure to seal different things. And I will say, I spray foamed the roof deck of my old home, and that made an incredible difference in the temperature. I'm really happy with that. And I have a basement, and I spray foamed what's called the rim joist, so just the wood that you can see that supports the floor all the way around, and that also made a really big difference. So
my next question. Are there companies that come in, inspect it, and then do the sealing in your attic? Because I don't know about other people, but it's difficult to get into my attic.
Yeah,
And I've never been into my attic.
yeah.
So, and I wouldn't try now, so.
Yeah, no, that's really fair. I don't know of many. I do believe that, Synergy Homes is still a company in Lexington that will do an audit, and they might do, there used to be people that would come and bring the blower door, which is this big fan, that would go in your door, and they would measure how much your house breathes essentially, and figure out how much it should, and then seal from there. And well, Kentucky Utilities even used to do stuff like that, but they don't do that anymore. Synergy might do that. That's possible. You can give them a call and see, or they might know who does do that. Yeah, and that's a fair point. Getting in attics. Oh, was there another question? Okay.
Not right now.
Getting in attic spaces is a good, like, especially if you move in and you decide you wanna venture in. I would definitely recommend classes, a dust mask, you know, even just when you're like moving around that, attic hatch, that's like mostly when stuff will fall on you, so that's the best time to have your glasses. And then just being really mindful in the space and, stepping on the actual joists and obviously not on the drywall or plaster, whichever type of house you live in, 'cause, yeah, you don't wanna flip through the ceiling, that would be a bad day. Yeah.
Handy person, like a regular, you just do, say you can't get in there, a regular handy person would be able to maybe go out and look around, is that?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, you could just say, hey, I want you to go and seal any of the penetrations in my ceiling. Yeah, I don't see why not. I guess, okay, then before we switch to lighting, are there any other questions about air sealing? Yeah, okay.
I was thinking about at the bottom of the doors, you know, I can sometimes see light come through and I can't tell if it's just because the weather's tricky, doesn't go down far enough?
Yeah.
Or is there something common people do for, space in the doorways?
Usually a door sweep is, it is a type of weather stripping. That's the most common permanent solution. So probably if you are seeing light, I would say either you want a new one because it's worn down, or it just needs to be moved down a little bit. Like you could undo it and see. I'm thinking it might be hard to do another hole too if it's too close. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you have enough space, you could move it down, or you get another one that's longer. Yeah.
In a driving basement where you, park your car and then walk upstairs,
Mm-hmm.
half the basement, when you can see the, I guess the floor joist has, insulation in between, but the other half of the house doesn't. So is that a good example of keeping cold upstairs?
Yeah, so in my mind, when you're driving into that garage, that's considered the outside. Like you're kind of wanting to insulate away from that, and that's generally true of garage spaces. So if you're like, okay, half the ceiling is insulated, I would imagine you'd want to insulate the rest of it at some point too, and that would improve your comfort. Like I imagine when you're upstairs in the part that's better insulated, you're maybe more comfortable.
Right,
Yeah. Did that answer your question?
right, thank you.
Yeah. Did you have one? No, okay, sorry. Alright. Well, you can stop me at any time too, if you think of something else. So lighting, you do have a couple of LED bulbs in here. 9-watt LED bulbs. Most people are pretty familiar with LEDs these days. The only things I like to point out are if you do still have incandescent or like any kind of alternative CFL bulb, it's sometimes helpful. Well, either you can replace them with the ones you have. These should have these noted too, but you can see on here there's a thing that says 60 watts and 11 watts. It's a little faded, but so this LED is 11 watts, but it's for a 60 watt equivalent bulb. So you know, if you're replacing bulbs in your old fixture, I often just I take them with me if I'm going to buy bulbs, so I don't And that way you're putting the right bulb into the fixture. It's not bad if you put the wrong bulb into a fixture, but that's when you get like flickering and things that will make you uncomfortable, like that's what would happen. Did you just remember something?
I was just thinking, one of the rooms, every time we switch the light on, it's like a flicker first.
Okay.
And I just thinking, does that mean something's electrical, or if it's actually the bulb itself?
I mean, I would check to see what the fixture says on, if it is a fixture, I would see what it says on the inside and what it's supposed to be, because it could be. It could also be something electrical. There's so many things that could be happening,
Yeah.
but,
I mean, yeah, I didn't think about that.
is it a dimmable fixture? No, that is one thing that can happen as well, so, no, it's not, well, so sometimes, like, this one does say dimmable on it, but if you don't get a dimmable LED and you put it in a dimmable fixture, that light quality will definitely make you uncomfortable. It will be flickery, it will not be pleasant, not all the time, but, yeah, if you have a dimmable fixture, you want a dimmable LED, and then you will be very happy with your light.
So it would say on there, on the bulb itself, somewhere, does it say dimmable?
This just says it on the package. I don't know if they actually have to list that on the bulb. They have to list the wattage though. And most fixtures, they also somewhere on your lamp have to have it stamped in there too, so you can figure out what means what. One thing that's really cool too is that now when you buy bulbs, often you can actually change, what's technically the temperature, but it's like effectively the color of the light, like the softness and such, and even, some of them you can even change other things, but, that is a really nice thing too, because people used to worry like, oh, I'm gonna get all these bulbs, and then they're gonna be this really intense light, but, cause sometimes you get home and it just looks different, depending on like the color of your walls and stuff, but now, you can often have like 2 or 3 settings on your individual bulb, and you can change it to a softer or warmer light, depending on what you need. So that is pretty cool, and even, there are actual, these are kind of like this, like can light bulbs. There are some houses that have the tube that's like sort of, resembles what you see above you, where there's a tube and there's a bulb that goes in there. But when you think about energy efficiency, so often those tubes actually protrude into our attic, and then you'd have to seal all of that in your attic. But now they have these like flat LEDs that you can actually just stick up there. They have like kind of little claws, and they're really handy, and you can change the temperature on those, and you don't have as much to seal. So that's pretty cool. But anyways, in terms of what you might use your lights for or your bulbs for when you take them home, I would just replace the areas you use most often first as you're replacing, and you know, the ones that are in the closet, they can kind of stay there. Like they can, you know, it's okay for the one in the closet to be incandescent until, it's also good to just use what we have too. But if there are spaces you use a lot that don't have LEDs, it would be a noticeable savings for you to switch them to LEDs. All right. Any other lighting questions before we move on to HVAC? Exciting. Very filter. Most people know to change your filters, and most people do them regularly enough that it works out. As far as filtration goes, there's no like wrong filter or like more efficient filter to buy. Like whatever one is the cheap one is great. It's really, the point of the filter is to protect your unit, and the more you protect your unit, that's really the efficiency part, is like getting to have that longer, it operates more efficiently, things like that. So generally, the things I mentioned about filters are, let's see, for example, people normally are interested in the MERV ratings. Those are the ratings for how small particulate matter it will filter out. So the higher the rating, the more it will filter. In general, those are great to use. The one thing I let folks know about is if you have someone that looks at your unit regularly, or someone you can call to just make sure like your unit is rated for whatever filter you want to use it for, because the problem that you can have is basically the same problem with the dirty filters. Ultimately, if you have something that your air has to push up against that is too clogged or is trying to push through too small holes, then your motor will just run out quicker. Not fast by any means, but you might be like, oh, I'm just using up more of the life of my HVAC unit, and they're expensive, so we like them to last a long time and operate efficiently. So if that's something you're interested in, just making sure that your unit can handle it, basically. That is also typically, if you want to get really in the weeds, you can find your unit's model number and you can Google it. And probably, especially these days, AI will probably give you an idea of what the rating is if you want to kind of wing it. But usually people have someone that they can call out and tell them that has seen their unit at some point, or who installed it, that can tell them what rating their unit can handle. Beyond that, sometimes reusable filters are also an option, also a great option. The only thing I tend to recommend is just get 2 for each unit, because the only problem that happens is they're like, oh, I gotta wash the reusable filter, and they take it out, and then a month later they're like, oh my god, I never put the reusable filter back. So it's nice to have one that you can put in right away, just to keep from that issue happening. And I do think, let me make sure that you have one thing for your filter in here. Yeah, it's called a filter whistle. So it's just a little plastic thing what clips on to your filter, one on each side, it snaps together. And when it's time to replace it and the dirt's filled up, it whistles at you. So it's kind of adorable.
What tune does it whistle?
If only it whistled a tune. Just a high-pitched, annoying one. Let's see. A little bit more about options for your units, things you can do. Generally speaking, it's good to have 6 inches of clearance around your unit. So just for example, in this picture, maybe having a little more space. Generally not have anything right over the top of it. But they are made to be outside, so, but having 6 inches gives it good protection overall. And in some of these photos, you can see it more than others. Here you can see these fins get dented up, buildup kind of can happen. You can just hose off buildup. You can take your hose and hose that off. If you really want to do something fun, I think it's kind of satisfying. There are these little metal combs, and you can actually comb your fins straight. If you happen to damage your unit, no problem. Last time I checked, they're just $6, and you can fix that yourself. Similar concept to the filters in terms of there's a fan blowing against the fins all the time. If all the fins are smashed up, it's gonna have to blow harder over time. It's not the end of the world, but that's it's an opportunity for efficiency and just extending the life of your unit. Okay, now we're getting into ductwork. Any other questions about HVAC units before I talk a little bit about ductwork?
Are you gonna get into replacing old heat pumps? Or
We'll talk about that with thermostats. I do talk about that, just in terms of versus electric heat, or replacing old heat pumps and what,
should you go with the heat pump again? Or
I mean, I would say probably.
if it runs on the emergency mode?
So we will talk about emergency mode, if that's what you're gonna do, yes, 100%, we will talk about that. That's almost the last thing I do.
Okay.
Yeah, great call. So ductwork, most times will be in your attic, in your crawl space, in your basement, maybe in your walls, in which case you're probably not gonna DIY the stuff in your walls. If you're lucky it's in your basement, you can actually do some work, and it's fairly simple to get to, reasonable to get to. Attics and crawl spaces are more complicated, so just again, a reminder, if you do go into those spaces, most people have some face masks these days lying around. having a dust mask is good, having glasses on is good. Some people even have like, there are these like, even just like a little hat, like a ball cap or something if you're going into your attic. Sometimes there's like ones that are a little bit hard. Just being mindful, if you do decide to go up like in the roof deck, the nails just come through, they're there, being aware, anyways. So as far as ductwork goes, we have what's called generally the trunk line or the central line. Most units have something like that. And what you would focus on is any sealing anywhere where one of these legs attaches to that trunk line or where one of those legs goes to a vent. Those would be the main areas. Maybe if you have metal ductwork turns or other areas you can also seal. So examples of what that might look like, especially with metal, and they may be sharp, so it's another thing to be aware of. But oftentimes, there's so many times where I've seen a duct that has just fallen and is setting on the ground, and you're just keeping cool on the outside, like I was saying, Chris Woolery used to say. But what you can do, which this is also a similar process for flex duct, which I'll jump to next. But just making sure you place them back together as best you can. It does not have to be perfect. Sometimes you do have like perforations that'll fit more nicely together, but you simply use aluminum tape, and I would use it liberally to keep that in place. And I do actually think you have some. This stuff. So you're prepared. So you use that to reattach it. You can stop there. You can say, that's good, that's enough. Lots of times people do use what's called duct butter or mastic, and that's like this clay material, and they go over that aluminum or metal duct tape, and they also use that liberally and cover it. And if you do that, you will not have to do this ever again. Like, you'll be done. But one thing to be aware of with the aluminum tape, if you decide not to wear gloves, which it's hard not to because it can be hard to maneuver without fine motor skills of your fingers, but it does cut your fingers, and you might not even notice. Like the first couple times I used it, the next day I was like, why does it feel like I have a bunch of paper cuts on my fingers? And it healed just fine, but just like you might not notice that that's happening. So just like be aware when you're using that. It is sharp. It is metal tape. But if you do, as so many people do, have flex ducts, instead of just using that metal tape often, so the only part you're sealing, flex ducts have the plastic, the insulation, and the plastic inside, right? So you're just using that inside part, and you're gonna seal that, usually to seal a metal trunk line. So you'll seal that to the opening, and I would use a zip tie first, because that stuff is really hard to finagle, so I would zip tie it in place and then duct tape it, or metal tape it, sorry you all. And often with flex duct, I do just tape it. You can also use mastic, but because you're not attaching metal to metal, I usually just use that aluminum tape. So that is a general duct sealing practice. Beyond that, these are kind of specific to manufactured housing, but as far as vents, so sometimes when you take your vent off, and you can see like in this photo, the duct is kind of falling down from the floor. In this case, you would probably need to adhere the ductwork to that wooden subfloor with something more intense than just your metal tape. People usually just nail it. So in that case, you would need to do that, but generally you don't need to do that. Most of the time you can just use this metal tape on all the seams and you can seal it. And you can do this from inside your house. So just making sure that the tape doesn't go outside of where you would put your vent cover back. But, and if it does, it's pretty easy to like tear and cut away. so it's not a big deal. But, that is also something, especially if your ducts are in the floor and they're easy to get to, or your vents are in the floor and easy to get to, that would be a pretty quick fix for some of them. And again, just like everything else, you know, the spaces in your house that are uncomfortable. So with any of these projects, just start in those uncomfortable spaces and you'll find something that you've learned here tonight in those spaces that you can do. Here's where I talk about emergency heat.
Well, I got a question. If my ducks aren't in a row, what do I do?
If they're what?
My ducks aren't in a row, what do I do?
Kind of like, I don't know. We gotta take them to a pond. I don't know what ducks need. Oh, I like it. Gotta love some silliness. So, most people are aware of the different options for Wi-Fi thermostats and different things. There are benefits to having setbacks at night or during the day when you're gone. The one thing that I do like to talk about is if you don't have that and you are using a traditional thermostat, one of the practices that people would do and still do is like they leave for work in the morning and this is only applicable in the winter, I should say. This is the emergency heat conversation. So you're leaving for work and you're like, I'm gonna set it back to 63 because I'm gonna be gone all day and I don't wanna waste all this heat while I'm gone. And then they get home and they're like, I'm gonna set it back to 72. And you know what? If you use a gas furnace, you can do that. And it's all the same. Like you're paying the same amount the whole time. It's not gonna impact your bill. You are actually gonna save money if you do that. You can also do that, you can schedule it. And it's all the same. If you have a heat pump and it's an electric heat pump, and you do that, you will get home every day, and when you bump it up, you will send it into that emergency heat, and that's that very expensive heat. So, if you do, the rule of thumb is don't do more than 2 degrees. If you wanna just do it manually, don't do more than 2 degrees, and then your heat pump should be able to recover the 2 degrees without sending into emergency heat, but probably not in the 10-degree days we have in Kentucky. Electric heat pumps on those days, you just probably let them be, is the most efficient thing to do, generally. But you can have more substantial setbacks if you use programmable thermostats that account for that timing and that will step that heat pump up instead of just sending it into emergency heat and it needs to catch up all those degrees. So that's something to be aware of. In the summer, it's all fair. It's all AC. It's all the same. So, but in the winter, that's something to be mindful of. Any other questions? Questions about emergency heat? Yeah, it's called a lot. It has a lot of names. There's also other alternatives. We can insulate our bodies just like we insulate our house. I will say, the reason I love to be in energy efficiency is because I want to empower people to live in homes that are comfortable for their bodies at the temperature that they're comfortable at. I think that's really important. So there are ways to save, and that's great. And I do that sometimes. And I like it, especially at night in the winter. I like it being a little colder. You know, people have a lot of different needs. The amount of times people have asked me to settle the score on what the right temperature of the thermostat is many, and I'm just here to tell you I'm not here to settle the argument. I don't know what that is, it's not. Everybody's different, but being comfortable in your home is important, and that's why we like to have these workshops so that you can feel empowered to do more so that our energy bills aren't so high that we don't feel like we can't be at 70, 72, 68, whatever it may be. So, and finally, one more safety point. I have to go out on the safety point. If you do decide, like, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna air seal all my whole house, it's gonna be great. One thing to be aware of is we do have these things in our home called combustion appliances. That's anything that uses natural gas or propane. Generally, that would be your gas furnace or your gas water heater. There's not a lot of other appliances that do that. But a lot of them do, like this gas water heater, need to exhaust and need mixed air to do that. So most of them have been inspected, at least when you bought your house or when you got maintenance on that unit. But one good thing to do would be have your maintenance person out to check, like, hey, is this properly exhausting entirely? And if it is, great, and it probably is, and it's fine. The reason we talk about it as a safety thing is if for some reason that wasn't exhausting properly and you just sealed up your house really tight, that would have to work a lot harder to get all that exhaust out. And if it's older and it's glitchy or something, it's just not doing its job properly, air sealing could have impacts on getting all of that exhaust out. So those are things to be aware of. Gas water heater is probably the most likely. A lot of gas furnaces are what's called sealed combustion these days. So if there's a PVC pipe in and a PVC pipe out, you're okay. But if there's metal, and if nobody's come to look at it in a long time, like that, it would be a great time to have somebody look at it. So that's one other thing to keep in mind. With that, this is our last slide. I will go over a couple more items. So you do have in here a guide of everything. And the last couple items are really related to water. So most people have seen pipe insulation for water lines. It's recommended, so you all have this in your kit, it's recommended, it already has an opening, you can slide it right on as it is and cut it to whatever length you need. But I would do your hot water line first, do as much of your hot water line right off of your water heater as you can, and then once you can't get any more, put it directly on your cold water line right at the start as much as you can, but hot water first. If you use it all on your hot water side, great. You also have a couple of aerators, different types of aerators. One for a shower head, so what it does is what it sounds like, it adds air to the water stream, and sometimes people are like, well, Rachel, I have this really nice shower head, and like, I don't know if I want, like, if this is gonna be as nice. And you might be right, but also, in Kentucky, we have really hard water, and lots of times people's shower heads are already so clogged up with minerals that you might just try this and put your other one in vinegar to soak and try this one, and I have one of these at my home and I love it. So this will save you both on your water usage, but also your hot water usage, so that's the energy efficiency relation of saving on heating your water as well. And you have two different types of sinks. You have one that rotates kind of like a kitchen sink type one, and then one that's smaller and more of like a traditional bathroom sink, but also some kitchen sinks would use this aerator, so you have both of those. And all you need to do that is a little bit of plumbing tape too, so you need that. And then this is really fun, you have a little solar panel charger. So you can like put that on your backpack or stick it in your window, like charge your phone or your little Bluetooth speaker. So I always think that's so fun. So that is what you have in your kit. There are resources. Energy Star is a great resource, especially if you're looking online for how to install things. They have a lot of good resources and even videos. Community Action Council, most people are familiar with their services, but if you need any assistance with energy bills or other information, they have a lot on their website. Kentucky Utilities still has some, they no longer do energy audits, but they still have some information about energy saving on their website. And if you are in charge of any of your utilities at like a business or involved with your church or something like that, they do have rebates for businesses. So that's something to keep in mind. House Smart Kentucky is a residential energy efficiency program available to people across eastern Kentucky. So if you are on any kind of rural electric co-op lines, that's a program that you should check out just to make sure, just in case you qualify for it. Bluegrass Greensource is an amazing resource. I love working with them for 10 years. It's amazing to realize it's been essentially a decade. They have many great resources on energy efficiency, but also other types of environmental resources on their website. You should definitely check it out. And then finally, Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, they do have a really interesting specifically information about energy burden in our state and just how, like this really cool interactive map that shows, that there's actually a higher energy burden, meaning people pay a higher percentage of their income on their energy bills in the rural parts of our state. So they have a lot of good information about what